Hey there, everyone. Welcome back to Utility Sports. And this NFL season's been crazy. And to top it off, there's more players on the NFL trade block than seemingly ever. In-season trades are a rarity in the NFL. Coming in, having to learn a playbook. Typically, that stuff is difficult and it lends teams to avoid making trades during the season. However, this year might be different. We've already seen the Atlanta Falcons and Cleveland Browns make a trade. And now at this point, it seems like there's more trades on the horizon here as we near the Week 8 trade deadline. Of course, there's going to be some movement this year. I think that's safe to say, and perhaps more movement than we've seen in recent years. So I'm really excited about this video, talking about some of the players that are on the NFL trade block right now. We do have 5 candidates, actually 6 players. I'm going to bring up a 7th and maybe 8th player as well today in this video that they don't have their own graphics, but I'm going to talk about them a little bit as well. So hopefully you guys do enjoy. If you do, make sure to leave a like and also subscribe to the channel for more content like this one. And let's jump into it here. Like I said, we're going to look at NFL trade candidates, potential teams interested, and we might even talk about some of the potential compensation that we could see for the teams trading away some of these very good players that are coveted by other teams around the league. First player I want to talk about here is a wide receiver for the New England Patriots. This is Kendrick Bourne. I think Kendrick Bourne's a player who could have some interest around the league. ESPN's Jeremy Fowler reported that some teams have called the Patriots asking for the wide receiver. Kendrick Bourne has made some plays this year for sure for New England, but I think that he could be slated to move elsewhere, especially with where New England's currently at in the division. Of course, Mac Jones' injury hasn't helped them win a ton of games, but they've stayed competitive. They're still in the thick of things in the AFC East, so I could still see them at this point wanting to keep some of their pieces. But for Kendrick Bourne, I think realistically, if they were to make a move, we could see them get a late day 3 draft choice from one of the following teams. You could look at the Chicago Bears, who are still trying to figure out that passing attack with Matt Eberflus as their head coach. Justin Fields is their QB1. They just don't pass the football very effectively at this point. I don't think that's a surprise to anyone that I'm saying that. And Justin Fields at this point is very close in number to the number of times he's scrambled for yardage compared to how many completions he's thrown this year. You don't want that from your QB1. And I think getting a guy like Kendrick Bourne could potentially help solve some of the issues there. I think they still need more wide receiver talent in Chicago. Now, the offensive line is still a problem as well. So we'll see if the Chicago Bears can maybe go out and find an offensive lineman, but that's very tough to do. Not a lot of teams going into week 7, week 8 are looking to give up their starting offensive lineman. So the Bears might be in a little bit of trouble still this year in that department, but Kendrick Bourne could definitely help out the receiver room. Then the Green Bay Packers, a team that at 3-3 through week 6, they don't love where they are. 2 games back of the Minnesota Vikings, who also beat them in their first head-to-head matchup back in week 1. The Vikings have a really strong lead in the division right now. The Vikings are going into a bye week here in week 7, and the Packers have to do some work here to figure out what's going wrong. They've been very reliant on some rookie wide receivers, Romeo Doubs, who's been awesome for them, and then also Christian Watson. He's been in there, made some plays, also has a few drops this year. So I think that they're still looking to solidify that wide receiver room as well. We knew this was going to be a problem for them after trading Devontae Adams, and it has been. Right, Kendrick Bourne could maybe help alleviate some of that. I'm not the biggest Kendrick Bourne fan in the world. I don't think that he solves all your issues, but if you're utilizing him as a wide receiver 2 or 3 next to Allen Lazard, Romeo Doubs, and then you still work Christian Watson in there, I think that does alleviate some of what they've lost. Not all of it, of course. He's not going to replace Devontae Adams, but he is worth a late day 3 draft choice. You're looking at maybe a 6th or 7th round pick to get this done, and it would help Green Bay significantly get through the rest of this regular season and still try and make a push in the NFC North. And then the New York Giants. What you're really selling yourself here for New York, we'll talk about another wide receiver that could become available later for them as well, is Kendrick Bourne. Is he a better option for you than David Sills? Because David Sills has been playing a ton this year. Brian Daboll has been pretty surprising with some of the guys he's relied on. Some of those he hasn't. Of course, Kenny Golladay no longer playing there. And, with Kadarius Toney, that's been the real surprise to me, is that Kadarius Toney's just not, healthy, not getting snaps when he is healthy. It's pretty surprising, but Kendrick Bourne maybe could come in and help the 5-1 surprise Giants improve their roster just a little bit more on paper. They've been playing really well. Not like they need to make some massive upgrades here, but I think Kendrick Bourne, again, for a late day 3 draft choice, could definitely solidify their wide receiver room a little bit more. Going into our next trade candidates, and we've got 2 of them here from the Carolina Panthers that I specifically want to talk about. Derek Brown, Brian Burns, two former first-round picks that, hey, the Carolina Panthers really like, and this is a really tough situation for them right now. The season just not going as well as they would have liked. They've got a new interim head coach there in Coach Wilkes. Obviously, they fired Matt Rule this year, so things are kind of up in the air right now. And Carolina's in a weird spot because they have to not only worry about this year, they have to worry about going into next year. Will a coach even want to coach this team with how bad their roster currently is? The outlook isn't great there in Carolina. And if they were to make a move here for either of these two guys, they would need to get a first-round draft pick for each one of them. They're not going to give up Brian Burns for anything less than a first-rounder and one that they feel like can be a pretty high first-round pick. And for Derek Brown, they would need a first-round pick as well. They took him in the top 5 a few years ago. They need to get good compensation for these two. My potential suitor here, the Philadelphia Eagles. I think that they're the team that can make a move for Brian Burns. They're 6-0 at this point through week 6 by the time I'm recording this video. And Brian Burns could definitely help this team as well. Go in, give you another really good pass rusher, and there's still youth and upside to him as well. Philadelphia, you're not only trading for right now, it also fits their long-term picture. Pass rusher who's going to be good for 7 or 8 years yet at this point. Definitely could be something that I could see Howie Roseman selling himself on. We already saw him make an aggressive move with the first rounder last draft, trading for A.J. Brown, and we know how well that's panned out so far. I definitely think that Brian Burns could help this team too, but if I had to guess, nothing gets done here with these two defenders for Carolina, and I think they ultimately hold on to both of them under the idea that, hey, we want to have some good players that a coach would want to come here and coach. If they strip this roster down with a vacancy at the head coaching position, it's very unlikely that a good candidate is going to prefer to coach for Carolina over some of the other jobs that are potentially going to open up this year as well. I just think right now, Carolina, not a very attractive destination for coaches. So they have to keep as much youth and talent that they have on their roster as possible. We'll talk about Carolina again in a little bit, but I think there are some other players here on this team that are worth mentioning right now. D lineman, Matthew Ioannidis, I could see him getting moved. Didn't include him in this video. Don't have a graphic on him, but I do think that Matthew Ioannidis could get moved for a late day 3 pick, maybe a 6th or 7th rounder like we talked about with Kendrick Bourne. There's a few teams I would be interested in getting him for defensive lineman depth. And also DJ Moore is a player that I don't think gets traded. I think he kind of falls in the same grouping here as Derek Brown and Brian Burns, where they're going to look at themselves and say, hey, he's just too good, too talented, too young to give up on at this point of rebuild. I think they're going to try and tie these 3 guys with Brown, Burns, and DJ Moore into their next iteration of good Panthers football, which is what they're hoping to build up over the next few years. Then we get into trade target 3. And of course, there's no surprise here that this guy would make the list. Talking about running back Cam Akers for the Los Angeles Rams, who has likely played his last snap for that franchise, regardless of if he gets traded or not in the next couple days. I think that realistically, he'll probably get traded, of course, at some point this year before the trade deadline, but I don't think it's necessarily imminent that he gets traded before week 7. We could see him get traded the day of the deadline, potentially. But I think that he's played his last game with the Los Angeles Rams regardless. So what teams could look and make a move for the former running back that looked like he was going to be the future of the Rams offense at the running back position? And there's some options here. The Denver Broncos, the reason I bring them up into this category, right now they're relying on Latavius Murray. They have obviously Melvin Gordon, and they have Mike Boone. 3 players who are okay, pretty solid. But realistically, when you look at them, they're like not great options, especially after Javonte Williams goes down for the season. You're not like, oh, yes, Latavius Murray's our number 1 running back, or, oh my gosh, yes, we have Melvin Gordon. That's not really selling yourself on something. Cam Akers, if you have to give up a 5th or 6th round pick to get a guy who is a former higher pick than that, it might be worth looking into that for Denver. I'm not exactly sold on them being a great suitor here, though. One team that I think would be a good suitor for sure, the Carolina Panthers. I think that they could make a lot of sense going out, getting another young player and banking on, hey, maybe he can live up to some of that potential or upside that we saw a few years ago when he rushed for 171 yards against the New England Patriots. That might be something that they can sell themselves on and say, hey, if we have a potential trade target at running back, who we're going to talk about later, maybe Cam Akers could be a nice, cheap replacement, and we could maybe help him rebuild where his career's at. I think this could be really good for both sides. And for Kansas City, it's about getting another guy in the room. Obviously, this year, Cam Akers has really struggled in pass protection, which makes this a little bit of an awkward fit. There'd have to be some work done with him to really get him back up to speed to where he needs to be to survive in the Chiefs offense. But with Mahomes' ability to escape pressure and make plays on the run, I think that Cam Akers could potentially work there, especially if they are looking for a guy who's just flat out a pretty good running back, despite only 3.9 yards per carry, which is a little bit below average. I think that Akers, there's still upside there when you actually see him, watch him. The stats don't necessarily back it up, but the eye test definitely does. Cam Akers, there's some upside if teams are willing to risk on it. Again, it would probably be a 5th or 6th round pick to get something done here if I had to guess. Then a player who has not played this season for my New York Jets, and that is Denzel Mims. In the offseason and preseason, he iterated that he wanted a trade out of New York, and obviously you can understand why. Last year they took a 2nd round wide receiver in Elijah Moore, who also isn't happy right now with his touches, and then Garrett Wilson they took in the 1st round this past year. They also went out and signed Corey Davis. They have really remade that wide receiver room. They also brought in 2 tight ends in Conklin and Uzama. So the share of the targets would never be there for Denzel Mims, even if he was on the field, and he just hasn't been. I think it makes sense for the Jets to really wash their hands of this situation. They need to move Denzel Mims now. If they don't, they're just not going to get anything for him, and he's going to enter free agency. At this point of his career, it's just, quite frankly, plain and simple. Denzel Mims is not going to be an impact player for the New York Jets ever at any given point. I don't think he's a high impact player really anywhere. But what I think you could maybe get for him is a day 3 draft pick swap where, hey, we give up our next year 7th, you give us your next year 6th, something like that. You move up 30 spots in the draft and get Denzel Mims off your roster. That's really the outlook here for the Jets and some teams that would be willing to do that. I have 2 teams that are kind of in that rebuild mode right now. The Houston Texans, you're taking a swing on the upside that made Denzel Mims a high 2nd round pick a few years ago. Chicago Bears, they're in that same boat. They're looking to bring in big, talented wide receivers. Denzel Mims, I think that the talent is there. He's 6'3", pretty good creating separation, especially on intermediate routes across the field. We saw that a lot at the collegiate level. He was very good at creating separation, especially on in-breaking routes. And I think there's some potential there to help out Justin Fields, Davis Mills early in their career by adding in a big-bodied target wide receiver like Denzel Mims. If you can keep him healthy, keep him on the field. And then again, a team that I think we've seen these teams make one trade before. The New York Giants and New York Jets, they made a trade for Leonard Williams. And I feel like both sides felt pretty good about that. Obviously, the Jets have new management in place. But that trade worked out pretty well for both sides, in my opinion. And I think here the Giants could say, hey, is Denzel Mims kind of in that same realm as David Sills? Is this just a depth receiver play for us? And if we just have to move a pick down about 28, 30 spots, might be a pretty good move for us. And even if it happens this year, maybe it's only 6 or 7 spots for the Giants if they give up their 6th and get the Jets 7th back, just based on how the Giants are playing right now. They played so well, but so have the Jets. So you never really know where those picks are going to be, especially this early in the season. But it's a pretty low risk move for them to just add a little bit more receiver depth into their room. And he wouldn't even have to move. He'd be staying right there in New York. Not sure how happy he is playing in East Rutherford, New Jersey, but Denzel Mims probably would try and make it work in a new situation. I think the Giants could provide that for him. Then our final trade candidate here, and it's the big one. Christian McCaffrey. He's the best player out on the trade block, and it's not even close. Players like him typically do not become available. Very rare to see a player of Christian McCaffrey's stature become available on the market. Someone who's eclipsed 2,000 scrimmage yards in a season, someone who could be an elite receiving option out of the backfield, someone who can put up over 1,000 yards on the ground. And as long as he's healthy, he does all of those things for you. And the best thing about this situation right now, his base salary was converted to just a little bit over $1 million. So you can basically fit him in anywhere financially at this point. So any team looking to make a move for him is going to be capable of doing that based on the salary cap. So who are my teams that are looking for him? First, the Buffalo Bills. They've been heavily linked to him, and whenever there's smoke, there's usually fire. I think that there's a reason the Bills are tied to Christian McCaffrey. James Cook, Devin Singletary, Zach Moss, that doesn't get it done when you're trying to win a Super Bowl, in my opinion. I think having a guy like Christian McCaffrey could be revolutionary for that offense. I think it would help them establish a little bit more balance in the run game. And I think he would be really special with Josh Allen as a receiver as well. I think this is a perfect pairing with the Buffalo Bills. But hey, the Los Angeles Rams, they're trading out Cam Akers. Maybe we could see Cam Akers included in a trade for Christian McCaffrey where both teams are feeling pretty happy about what they're getting. The Panthers would probably get good pick compensation. That's a little bit tougher with the Rams because they tend to not have their first round picks, just like they don't this year. The Detroit Lions have it from the Matthew Stafford trade, but they'd have to do some, fine working there in the discussions to make a trade work. Then the San Francisco 49ers staying in the NFC West. I think they're a team that, yes, they have Jeff Wilson this year. Elijah Mitchell's still there. They have not had a running back of Christian McCaffrey's caliber. And if you look at Kyle Shanahan right now, there's a lot of question marks about how much of an offensive guru he is. And I think those questions are fair. Let's get him a premier running back and see how his offense really looks. I think if you do have a premier running back there, he's going to make it work. Think back to his time with Devontae Freeman, Tevin Coleman back with the Atlanta Falcons as a coordinator. That offense was elite because he had two running backs he could rely on. If you put Christian McCaffrey there, you have a do-it-all running back that he knows will get the job done for him pretty much every single down. And then the Kansas City Chiefs, we mentioned them as a potential landing spot maybe for Cam Akers. Well, if they want to go really all in and say, hey, we lost Tyreek Hill, we could really use another playmaker here, why not go trade for a 26-year-old running back? He's on somewhat of an expensive deal long-term. He's got 2 more years after this year. But again, with that base salary at $1 million, they can squeeze him in, make it work. And for the compensation, late first-round pick this year, you see 4 contenders, I think, at this point. Right now, willing to give up their first-round pick. You could see that being worthwhile for Carolina. Or maybe you get an early day 2 pick from one of these teams and a mid-day 3 pick. So you're looking at a second-rounder and maybe a 4th or 5th rounder in addition if they're not willing to give up that first. Anyway, here Carolina can get more value. They're going to have to really look into that and try and get that done. But Christian McCaffrey, he's the cream of the crop right now in the trade block. And at the running back spot, if you can get him up to speed pretty quickly with your playbook and everything that's expected of him, you can make a lot of things work. And he could really be a game-changing player when it comes to the Super Bowl race. I think if Buffalo gets him, it really cements themselves as the favorite in the NFL to win the Super Bowl. I think if the Rams get him, it really gives them a better chance at pulling out of the NFC West. And same with the Niners. I think those two teams are competing with each other here a bit to win the NFC West, both of them 3-3 at this point. Kind of underwhelming. McCaffrey could be game-changing for both of those organizations. And then Kansas City, like I said, if they're trying to replace Tyreek Hill's production to a certain extent in a different way, McCaffrey could definitely help them out in that regard. He would be the best running back Mahomes has ever played with, and it wouldn't even be close. Thank you guys all so much for watching. Hopefully you did enjoy this video. Let me know in the comment section down below where you think some of these players will get traded. And if they'll get traded, let me know what you thought about this video. Thanks again so much for watching. Hit that like button, subscribe if you're new, and we'll catch you in the very next Utility Sports video.